Hello and welcome to my review of the Honda Civic Type-R. This is the FK8 model, which was introduced in 2017. Now, as we near the end of 2020, it's due its mid-cycle facelift, which will be coming very shortly. Now, I have all the details for that, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to concentrate on this car. We're going to review this car, and then at the end of the video, what I'll do is I'll talk through and show you visually some of the differences and styling changes made for this new facelift edition. All right, first off, let's deal with the elephant in the room. It's not exactly a shrinking violet, is it? Not a wallflower. You're not going to mistake it for the bottom of the range diesel model with all its scoops and spoilers and vents and creases and that giant spoiler on the back there. Now, opinion on this is very, very divided. It's very much a Marmite thing, you know, love it or hate it. There is good news though, if you do find yourself liking everything else about the car, but you're not too impressed with its extravagant looks, shall we say, there is good news on the horizon in terms of the Sportline model, which is one of the new facelift models coming out, which I mentioned before, and I'll speak about in more detail at the end of the video. The car houses a 2-litre turbo engine producing 316 brake horsepower and 295 pound-foot. Also has a very generous 7,000 RPM redline. One of the first things that strikes you when climbing into the car are the seats. And that's not because they're red. I mean, they are very red, so it'd be pretty hard to miss them. But on first impressions, they're very comfortable. They're certainly very, very supportive. So it's going to be very interesting to see what they're like over a long journey. Now, this particular car is the GT spec. You have the standard Type-R, and then you have the GT, the Type-R GT, which commands a £2,000 premium over the standard Type-R. Now, what do you get for your money? Okay, are you ready? Here's the list. So, first off, you get satellite navigation. You get wireless charging for your phone. Blind spot monitoring in the mirrors. Parking sensors on the front and the rear. Dual zone climate control compared to the single zone that's in the non-GT car. Power folding door mirrors. Premium sound, which consists of a more powerful amplifier for the stereo and 11 speakers instead of 8. And LED fog lights. The car's got 3 driving modes: Comfort, Sport and Plus R. All 3 of them will adjust the adaptive dampening for the suspension and also the throttle response. But additionally, Plus R will also change the traction control settings. I'll show you those on the screen. If I start up the car here, you'll see the fully digital center display come into action, which is actually quite nice. And at the moment, I've got it in Sport. If I put it back in Comfort, okay, firstly, here's the switch I mentioned. So you toggle down or up depending upon your desired setting. What you'll see, apart from it telling me I haven't got my seatbelt on, what you'll see is at the moment we're in Sport, and there are red lights around the exterior. If I drop that back into Comfort, those red lights disappear. It's less racy, apparently. Okay, so if I pop that back into Sport, you see those red lights pop up. And if you go one further and take it into Plus R, then everything goes red. Quick back seat test. Let's have a look how much space we've got back here. That's not bad at all. So I'm 5'11". The seat in front of me here, the driver's seat in front of me, is set up for me, for my driving position, and yep, my knees are not touching the seat in front. I've got an inch and a half there, maybe from my knees. Yeah, plenty of space. One point which really stands out from a practicality point of view is the storage capacity in the back. The boot on this thing is fairly enormous. You've got 420 litres in here, even more, 700 and something once you put the back seats down as well. But 420 litres is standard. It's a size that compares very well to its rivals. The Golf's around 380 litres and the Focus is about another 100 less than that. So I'm going to take this car on a road test, properly stretch its legs, work out all of its good attributes and its bad, and report back to you. Now, rather than just doing the standard type of road test, I'm going to really put this car through its paces. I'm taking the car up to the north of Scotland to do the North Coast 500, which is a 500-mile loop around the very top of Scotland. Some of the best driving roads in the country, fantastic sweeping bends, tight hairpins, all sorts of things. Should really put the car through its paces and give me a good indication of what it's like to live with on a daily basis. Probably going to be doing about 15 or 1600 miles over the course of a week, so that should really give me a fantastic flavour for what this car's all about. Okay, so I'm going to get on with that, and then I'll report back to you on here once we're done. So I'm in Scotland. I've been here for a week now, doing the North Coast 500 with this car. And how do I get on with it? In a word, it's brilliant. Okay, now once you get past those rather outlandish looks from the outside, which I've got to say, although I'm not a massive fan of them, I've stopped noticing them now. I really have. I just wake up in the morning and I can't wait to get in this car and tackle some more mountain roads. We've had every variety of road going that you can imagine. Long sweeping bends, tight hairpins, single file narrow roads, everything. And this car has coped with them all brilliantly. It accelerates very, very well. That sounds like a ridiculous thing to say. 0 to 60 is 5.6 seconds, I think, but it seems to accelerate more ferociousness than that. I don't quite know how to describe it. Handling is superb. It's got very, very low profile 20-inch wheels on this, but the handling is brilliant. There's no sign of understeer or anything like that from the front. It grips and it digs in and it turns into corners. Suspension, I would say, is spot on. I've run it in sport the entire time. I've done 1,500 miles by the time I get home, and at no point have I felt the urge to put it back into comfort mode, because I think it's very, very well judged. The seating position is great. I've not felt uncomfortable at all, and I've had days where I've spent 6 or 7 hours in this car and it's kept me comfortable the whole time through all sorts of different driving conditions. So I think that's really good. The fact that it handles so well and can keep you comfortable at the same time, I think is superb. Hello, I've returned from Scotland now, where I did a touch under 1,700 miles in this car in 6 days. That meant I averaged 6.5 hours a day in this car for each of those 6 days, and no complaints. I was kept incredibly comfortable the entire time. Really, really good. That was excellent. Touch a bit on the driving modes in terms of comfort. I mentioned before I kept it in sport for just about the entire time. Didn't really drop into comfort at all, didn't see the need. I was perfectly comfortable in sport, and it was giving me the kind of feedback and performance that I liked. The third driving mode, which I didn't mention, the Plus R. Now, certainly on those kind of less major roads that I was driving on in Scotland, too firm. It made the car skittish. It really firmed up the suspension, made the car skittish, and quite uncomfortable, bouncing over bumps and things in the road. As you might expect, that mode is clearly designed for track use or conditions where the road surface is much smoother, perfect kind of conditions. So I don't think it would be a controversial comment to say that you probably wouldn't use that mode on the road. However, the rest of the car, from a seating and comfort point of view, I always like, when you're in a car, you've got a few points where your body makes contact. You've got the steering wheel, where you feel the steering wheel. This is a really nice, comfortable steering wheel. You've got the pedals. Some cars have those horrible rubbery plastic brake pedals. You've got alloy pedals here. These seats, as I mentioned, really, really supportive and comfortable as well. I have to keep saying comfortable, but I kind of have to, given that the mileage I put into this car is a redeeming feature of it. And the other one is the gear stick. They've changed the gear stick slightly for the facelift model, which I'll touch on in a moment. But the gear change in this car is very positive. It's a nice gear change. It's yeah, well done there. So everywhere you touch on the car, everywhere it's tactile, done a great job of making you feel engaged with the car and comfortable. There's that word again. Some niggles though, because no car's perfect. Okay, now this is front wheel drive car and it's putting down 316 brake horsepower. There's no surprise that it will struggle under hard acceleration in first and second gear. I mean, it's a difficult proposition. You could improve things by, you could say, make it four-wheel drive, make it rear-wheel drive. I'd love to try this car rear-wheel drive. Make it rear-wheel drive. But you add an extra weight, you actually add an extra complexity, and consequently you add an extra cost. And possibly, if you start messing about with the drivetrain, you're possibly going to change the driving dynamics of this car as well. Now this car is loads of fun to drive. So if you start messing with that, maybe you take away some of the car's character. And that, you know, I'd rather have the character and it struggle for grip every now and again. I really would. I mean, I lived with a Golf R for a couple of years, which is one of these cars' rivals, although it's more expensive than this car. And sure, you'll get much better wet weather performance out of it, but it doesn't have the character of this car. It's nowhere near as much fun to drive as this car. It's more subtle, it might be a bit more refined, but this car is loads more fun than that. My other complaint is the infotainment system. I'm not a fan. I'm not a fan of these whole touchscreen things. If you look at cars from like BMW or Mercedes or even my MX-5, they have a control cluster down by the gear stick. Now what that means is you can drive down the road looking straight ahead and you know where the controls are. You have a dial or what have you, depending upon the model, and you can just bounce your way through menus like that. With this infotainment screen, you've got a number of dynamic buttons on the screen, and what I mean by that is when you hit different menus, the buttons change locations, even change size. Obviously you can't feel for the buttons, so you have to take your eyes off the road to look at the screen. Some of those buttons can be quite small, and when if you're bouncing along the road, it's not as easy as you might think to be able to hit them, and that can't be a good thing if you're constantly having to look at the screen. Not impressed. Again, they have made some changes for the facelift model. I'll touch on those in a few minutes, which might improve things slightly. The other thing about the infotainment screen, the screen itself, when you put the car into reverse and the reversing camera comes up, the resolution's really poor. I mean, I can't say much more than that. I mean, have a look here. It just provides a pretty naff picture, if I'm honest. Okay, all those minor gripes aside, this is a fantastic car. Really is a fantastic car. Whether you judge it as good value for money against some of its rivals, £34,000. It's not cheap. It's cheaper than things like the Golf or the Audis or such, but it's more expensive than things like the Focus ST. However, it's got more performance. So I'm going to talk through now, as I keep promising, I'm going to talk through some of the changes with the facelift model. Okay, so you can see what's coming up in the new version, which is going to hit the streets any moment now. You might be hard pressed to tell that this is the facelift model because the changes are fairly mild. They don't immediately jump out. Now, I'll go through the styling tweaks in a second, but firstly there are a couple of mechanical changes they've made under the skin. The first one's the suspension, which has been stiffened. The geometry has been changed slightly, and they've retuned the adaptive dampening to make it a bit quicker. Now this car already handled exceptionally well, so time will tell what this means for its rivals, because if it handles even better, then this is going to be absolutely stunning. Brakes have been changed. Whereas before they were single-piece brake discs, they are now two-piece brake discs, and that's been done to provide better feel and also save weight. About 2.5 kilos per corner apparently, so that's not insignificant at all. Everything else on the car, from a mechanical point of view, is completely identical. Same engine, same drivetrain, same performance. Using my undisputed superb Photoshop skills, I've mashed up a composite here of the two cars. If you look down towards the fog lights, you'll see a revised air intake and a little winglet on the car on the left, which is the facelift model. That, when combined with a revised radiator sitting behind it, apparently, under heavy driving on the track, cools the engine by an extra 10 degrees. Okay, so that's why that's there. It's a very subtle change, and you probably wouldn't even notice it on a dark colour, but that's what it is. And if you look at the back of the car, that styling tweak carries through as well, so you can see that little winglet there in the corner. Onto the interior, and they've made some changes to the infotainment system, so I can't have been the only person who was not impressed by them. They've put some buttons on it. I mean, there's a volume knob there, but you could do the volume on the steering wheel anyway, but they've put some buttons above that, so a home button, map, audio, etc., which would be very welcome. Really, really good. Maybe they've listened to the feedback, and that's fair play to them. They've also, just down below that, you'll see there are fan controls there now. Before, there was just a single climate button. You had to press the climate button and then control the fans via the touchscreen. So it's now got buttons there, very, very welcome. Elsewhere in the interior, there's now an Alcantara steering wheel. I'm not normally a fan of Alcantara steering wheels personally, but that is a very subjective opinion. There's also a revision to the gear knob of all things. I think it's a bit heavier now, and it's also shaped a bit more like a teardrop. Well, it looks the same in this picture, but early indications are that it feels even better, which is good. It's nice to see a car company put in effort into the areas that matter. Like I said before, you only touch those few parts of a car when you're sitting inside it. So for them to put some work into it to try and improve those areas is great. It shows they're not resting on the laurels. So this new spec in the lineup is the Sportline model, which I spoke about earlier on in the video. That's designed to be a bit more subtle, because let's face it, the normal one isn't subtle, and by which you can see immediately from the pictures here, it's missing that massive rear wing on the back. The alloys are smaller, they're 19-inch instead of 20-inch. I'm not sure what difference that will make to the handling or ride quality. And it's also missing that red piping, which was prevalent around the outside of the alloys and also along the skirts around the side of the bottom of the car. Inside, it's got the red seats are gone now, and it's got black seats instead of red seats. Okay, so again, subtlety. So this is clearly aimed at people who love the idea of the car but were put off by its outlandish, aggressive looks. The other car they've released is a limited edition one, which I'm not going to spend too much time talking about because they've only made 100 worldwide and only 20 of those came to the UK, and they're all sold out. Basically, it's a much more track-focused version. They've removed about 50 kilos in weight, taken out the aircon, taken out the infotainment system, etc., etc. It's a track-focused car. They're all sold out. Chances are you'll never see one. Okay, that's me done. That's my review of the 2020 Honda Civic Type-R. If you want to see more footage from my North Coast 500 trip, there's a series of 5 videos, and I'll put the link in the description. In the meantime, thank you for watching again. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll catch up with you next time.